We were born 3 years apart, but you'd think my parents raised us on different planets. Brianna, my sister, was the golden child, pretty, outgoing, always saying the right thing. The kind of kid who could spill juice on the carpet and somehow get praised for being creative with color. I, on the other hand, was the practical one. That was Mom's polite way of saying I didn't need attention. Our family looked picture-perfect from the outside. 2-story house in suburban Columbus, Ohio. Dad mowed the lawn every Saturday like it was an Olympic event. Mom baked cookies that somehow always made it to church bake sales but rarely to our kitchen table. Family photos lined the hallway, everyone smiling, coordinated outfits, the works. But if you looked closely, you'd notice the small things. In every photo, Mom's hand rested on Brianna's shoulder. Never mine. When I was 7, Brianna broke a glass vase. She cried, blamed the dog, and somehow I was the one holding the broom. "You're older," Mom said. "You should have been watching her." I was 7, she was 4, but apparently, I was also her unpaid babysitter. That became the pattern. Her mistakes, my lessons, birthdays were their own comedy show. Brianna's gifts came wrapped in shiny boxes from real stores. Mine looked suspiciously familiar because they were. One year, I got her old bike, spray-painted silver. "See?" Dad said. "It looks brand new." Sure, if you ignored the dented handlebars and the faded sticker that still said Brianna's Princess Ride, I rode it anyway, because that's what the strong one does. In school, I worked hard quietly. Straight A's, no fuss. Teachers liked me, but my parents didn't see much point in showing up for parent-teacher conferences. They were busy. Yet every time Brianna forgot her homework, Mom wrote a note. "Please excuse Brianna, she wasn't feeling well." I once forgot mine and got a lecture about responsibility so long I could have written a paper on it. It wasn't just the big things. It was the constant drip of small differences. When Brianna sneezed, Mom ran for tissues. When I sprained my ankle in gym class, Mom said, "You'll be fine, Kara. You're tough." That line, "you're tough," became my nickname at home. I used to think it was a compliment. Later, I realized it was permission. Permission for them to care less. Dad was the quieter type, but not the fairer one. He adored Brianna's charm. She'd twirl her hair and say, "Daddy, can I have $20? And he'd laugh like it was the cutest thing he'd ever heard. I asked once for money to join the after-school robotics club, and he said, "You don't need that. Just study hard." Apparently, fun was a luxury I hadn't earned. By high school, I stopped expecting fairness. Brianna got a car for her 17th birthday, a used Honda Civic with a bow on top. I got the family minivan shared with Mom. "You don't go out much anyway," she said. Which was true. I didn't. I was busy working at a local diner after school. Minimum wage, greasy apron, smelling like fries while Brianna posted photos from mall trips captioned "number blessed." Still, I told myself it didn't matter. Being self-reliant was something to be proud of. I saved every paycheck in a shoebox under my bed, counted every dollar like it was armor. Every coin meant one less thing I'd have to ask for. Then came senior year. College talk filled the house. Brianna wanted to major in communications, whatever that meant. I applied for accounting at the same school, University of Dayton. When the acceptance letters came, we screamed together in the kitchen, jumping like idiots. For a brief, impossible second, it felt equal. I thought maybe, just maybe, we'd start from the same line for once. That night, as I headed downstairs for water, I heard my parents talking in the living room. Mom's voice, calm and decisive. "We'll pay Brianna's tuition in full," Dad replied. "And Kara?" A pause. "She's clever. She'll figure it out. She always does." I froze. My hand was still on the banister, heart pounding so hard I thought they might hear it. Those words, "she'll figure it out," were supposed to sound like praise. They landed like a sentence. I didn't move for a while. Just stood there, listening as they talked about payment plans and scholarships for one daughter and independence for the other. The kind of independence that sounds noble until you realize it means you're on your own. When I finally went upstairs, I stared at my ceiling for hours. My room was quiet except for Brianna's laughter down the hall. She was on the phone, already talking about dorm decor and campus parties. I stared at the shadow of my ceiling fan and thought, of course they did. The next morning, Brianna waved her acceptance letter like a trophy. Mom hugged her so tightly she lifted off the ground. "We're so proud of you," she said. When I walked in with my own letter, Mom smiled politely, then turned back to Brianna. "Maybe you two can room together," she joked. Brianna laughed. I didn't. Later that day, Dad asked if I'd thought about taking out loans. "It builds character," he said. "Right, so does neglect." I didn't argue. I just nodded and said I'd handle it. And I meant it. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't even tell them how much it hurt to realize love came with a price tag I apparently couldn't afford. Instead, I went to my room, opened my laptop, and searched how to pay for college without family help. That's how I founded the Air Force Tuition Assistance Program. Serve 4 years, earn benefits, get your education covered. The words "serve your country" sounded bigger than me, but also clean, honest. Nobody could say I didn't deserve what I earned there. That night, I filled out the online application, hands shaking just a little. The form asked for a reason for enlisting. I wrote, "To earn my own future." When I told my parents a week later, Mom's fork clattered against her plate. "The military? Kara, that's not for you. You're a girl." "I know," I said, "but I'm also broke." Dad chuckled like it was a joke. "Well, that's one way to learn responsibility." "Yeah," I said. "Guess I'm finally putting that lesson to use." Nobody stopped me. Nobody offered help. Mom hugged me briefly before I left for basic training, said, "You'll be fine, Kara. You're strong." It sounded almost loving. Almost. But what she really meant was, "We're done worrying about you." I boarded the bus at dawn with one duffel bag, a notebook, and a heart that felt strangely light. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for their permission to start. And if they believed I didn't need them well, maybe that was exactly what I was about to prove. The bus to basic training left at dawn, and the air outside felt colder than it should have been for August. The ride was quiet, except for the low hum of nervous recruits and the driver's country radio. I stared out the window, watching the highway signs blur by, every mile putting distance between me and the house where I learned I wasn't worth investing in. I didn't cry, not once. If anything, I felt something close to relief. Finally, there was no one to compare me to. Basic training hit like a brick wall. Day 1, a sergeant yelled at me for breathing wrong. Literally. "You think this is yoga, Mitchell? Stand straight." I learned fast that in the Air Force, no one cared about feelings, which, honestly, was kind of perfect. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn approval that never came. At least here, effort meant something measurable. You did the work, you got the credit. Simple math. The first week was a blur of shouting, sweat, and cheap coffee. I barely slept, ate in silence, and learned how to march, salute, and fold a bed so tight you could bounce a quarter off it. I failed the push-up test the first time, and the sergeant barked, "Weak arms, Mitchell? Didn't Daddy pay for your gym membership?" I almost laughed. If only he knew. At night, I'd lie awake in the barracks, muscles screaming, hands blistered, thinking about Brianna's dorm life. She was probably hanging posters and planning parties while I scrubbed floors with an old rag. She'd post pictures on social media with captions like, "College life begins," while my reality was, "Try not to die before lunch." But something shifted after that first month. The yelling didn't sting as much. The exhaustion started feeling normal. The girl who once worried about being invisible was suddenly thriving in a place where no one gave handouts. I started running faster, shooting better, ranking higher. Every time I hit a goal, I whispered to myself, "Figure it out, right? You're figuring it out." 6 weeks in, our unit ran a timed obstacle course, mud pits, walls, ropes, the works. The sergeant shouted, "Move it, airman! Let's see who's got it." My lungs were on fire, mud up to my knees, but I pushed through. Halfway across the rope climb, my grip started to slip. The old Kara would have stopped. This Kara kept climbing. I hit the bell at the top and came down covered in dirt, shaking but grinning. The sergeant blew his whistle. "Mitchell, fastest time today. Didn't think you had it in you." I wanted to say, "That's because no one ever did," but I just nodded. After training, I was stationed at Langley Air Base in Virginia. Not glamorous, but stable. My first assignment was security detail, long hours, early mornings, constant alert. It wasn't easy, but for the first time, I felt in control. I earned my own paycheck, had my own small dorm, and didn't owe anyone a single explanation. When my first paycheck hit, I didn't spend a cent. I printed it out, pinned it on my wall, and wrote in Sharpie underneath. No one paid for this but me. I called home after a few weeks, mostly because guilt got the better of me. Mom answered on speakerphone. "Oh, hi, honey. How's the army?" "It's the Air Force, Mom." Right, the one with planes. "Are they treating you well?" "They're yelling a lot less." She laughed politely, then called out, "Brianna, your sister's on the phone." I could hear Brianna's voice in the background, half distracted. "Hey, college is crazy busy. You'd love it." "Well, maybe not. You hate crowds." "Yeah," I said. "I'm doing fine." "That's great. I've got a group project, so I'll call later, okay?" "Sure," I said, but the line was already dead. Mom came back. "She's just adjusting. You know how college is." "I wouldn't," I said. "You didn't pay for mine." There was silence, just long enough for me to imagine her frowning. "You're strong, Kara. You'll do fine." "I know," I said and hung up. The next 6 months blurred together training drills, base routines, the same cafeteria meals that all tasted like salt and cardboard. Somewhere in that monotony, I started to enjoy the structure. It was predictable, honest, unlike home. Then one night during guard rotation, an older airman named Rivera sat beside me at the checkpoint. "Why'd you join up?" he asked. "Couldn't afford college." He chuckled. "Same here. Parents couldn't help?" "They helped," I said. "Just not me." He let out a low whistle. "Family, huh? They mess you up worse than war." "In F." "Yeah," I said, staring into the dark runway lights. "But at least the military pays you for the trauma." We both laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that's half truth, half survival. By year 2, I'd earned a small promotion. My parents didn't call. I sent a text about it once. Mom replied with a thumbs-up emoji. That was her version of pride. Meanwhile, Brianna's college updates flooded my feed. Greek letters, party photos, spring break selfies with captions like, "Best life." The contrast was almost funny. She had family, funded freedom. I had government, issued boots and a salary that barely covered cafeteria coffee. Still, I wouldn't have traded places. She was playing life on easy mode, and I was finally leveling up on my own. A few weeks later, I got a care package from home. Inside were socks, toothpaste, and a card that said, "Proud of you, soldier," with a smiling cartoon flag. No note, no name. Just the card. I laughed. Not bitterly, just in disbelief. It was the kind of gesture that said, "We didn't forget you, we just don't know you." I kept the card anyway, taped it next to my paycheck, a reminder of where I came from and why I wasn't going back. One night during patrol, a plane took off into the dark sky, lights blinking against the clouds. I watched it fade, thinking about how that used to be my sister, someone who got lifted up without ever having to earn it. Then I realized something. I wasn't jealous anymore. I was just done comparing. The next morning, my unit was called into formation. A captain read off names for a new assignment, logistics, and data management. More responsibility, more hours. When he said, "Mitchell, Kara," I stepped forward. "Yes, sir." He looked at me, scanning my file. "You're the only one who volunteered for extra duties." "I figured it'd keep me busy, sir." He smirked. "That's one way to stay out of trouble." End quote. Later, while organizing equipment logs, I came across my own training records. Under performance notes, a line stood out. "Shows initiative, self-driven, doesn't rely on others." I almost laughed out loud. That's one way to describe growing up Mitchell. By the end of that year, I had savings for the first time in my life, a small circle of friends who didn't care where I came from, and a reputation for getting things done. No excuses, no safety nets. When people back home asked my parents about me, they'd say, "Kara's in the Air Force, she's doing fine." That was it. No pride, no stories, just a line to fill silence. But fine was good enough for me. Fine meant surviving. Fine meant standing on my own 2 feet without anyone claiming they helped me get there. And maybe, just maybe, Fine was the first step towards something better. The air on base always smelled like metal and jet fuel. It clung to your clothes, your hair, even your dreams. I used to think that kind of smell meant progress. Now it just meant I was too tired to care. Days started at 5 a.m. sharp, with the sound of boots pounding pavement and a voice yelling, "Move! Airmen!" I didn't need coffee anymore. Adrenaline did the job. Most people think military life is all heroics and glory. They never mention the paperwork, the waiting, or the aching silence between orders. I learned quickly that success here wasn't about shouting the loudest, it was about surviving quietly. You followed orders, you didn't complain, and you made yourself indispensable. I was good at that part. Years of being overlooked at home turned out to be perfect training. Langley Air Base was a strange mix of discipline and chaos. One moment, you were double-checking security clearances. The next, you were standing guard in freezing rain, pretending the cold didn't matter. My first week on duty, I stood outside the hangar for 8 hours straight while a thunderstorm rolled in. Lightning cracked so close it made my chest vibrate. I didn't move. When the shift ended, my sergeant nodded. Didn't flinch once. Good. That was all the praise I needed. Somewhere between guard shifts and drills, I started to find a rhythm. Work, eat, run, sleep, repeat. It was exhausting, but weirdly freeing. No one here cared who your parents were or how much money they spent on your tuition. What mattered was how fast you ran, how steady you aimed, and whether you showed up when it counted. A few months in, I got assigned to a mixed-unit operation team, half men, half women. It sounded fair on paper, but fairness in the military was like fairness at home. Technically possible, practically non-existent. I could feel the skepticism the minute I walked in. Some guys didn't even try to hide it. "You sure you're in the right unit?" one of them said. "We usually need people who can actually lift gear." I smiled, clipped my helmet strap, and said, "Don't worry, I'll carry you if I have to." By the end of the month, I was outpacing all of them on endurance runs. They didn't joke after that. Still, being good wasn't the same as being seen. Promotions came slow, recognition slower. I worked shifts, no one wanted holidays, overnight patrols, security details so dull you could feel your brain dissolve. I didn't complain. Complaining was a luxury for people who had backup plans. One morning, our team lead, Captain Ryan Holbrook, called me into his office. Holbrook was one of those officers who looked permanently unimpressed, calm, sharp eyes, the kind of man who could spot a mistake before you made it. "You've been pulling a lot of double shifts," he said. "Yes, sir." End of Sachs. "Any particular reason?" "I like finishing what I start." He raised an eyebrow. "You ever plan on sleeping again?" "Eventually." He almost smiled. "You remind me of someone who doesn't know when to stop proving herself." "I'll take that as a compliment." "It's not," he said. Then, after a pause, "But maybe it should be." That conversation stayed with me. Not because it was warm or encouraging, it wasn't, but because it was the first time someone noticed I existed for more than just filling a shift. A few weeks later, Holbrook ran an inspection on our data security logs. I found 3 inconsistencies and corrected them before he even asked. When he checked the reports, he looked up from his screen. "You caught all of these?" "Yes, sir." "Good eye. You ever consider cross-training into finance or logistics? You do well there." I shrugged. Didn't think I was the type. "Discipline beats type," he said. "Think about it." I didn't answer then, but I did think about it. That night, after lights out, I opened my notebook and started writing down every skill I could learn that didn't depend on anyone's permission: budgeting, management, operations. If I was going to build a life out of nothing, it had to start here. Meanwhile, the news from home kept rolling in through filtered updates. Brianna had joined a sorority. She'd gone on a spring break trip to Cancun. She got a new laptop for studying. Each photo on social media looked like a commercial for a life I was never offered. Mom commented under every post. "So proud of you, sweetheart." I never saw those words under anything I did. Not that there was much to post from base unless people found sandbags and rations photogenic. When I did call home, the conversations were short. "Hey, Mom." "Oh, hi, Kara. How's the military life?" "Still in one piece." "That's good. Brianna's doing so well. She got invited to her professor's dinner." "That's great," I said. "I gotta go. Duty call." It wasn't duty. I just didn't feel like listening anymore. By my second year, I'd stopped expecting anything from them. The less I reached out, the easier it was to breathe. Independence had become less of a necessity and more of a shield. One afternoon, while I was reviewing maintenance schedules, Holbrook stopped by again. "I recommended you for advanced certification," he said. He blinked. "Me?" "Yeah, you. Don't make it weird." "I'm just surprised, sir." "You shouldn't be. You do the work. People notice that." I wanted to say, "Not the people who matter," but I kept that to myself. The training that followed was brutal long hours, endless numbers, and a computer system that seemed to hate me personally. But I passed. Barely slept, lost weight, but passed. Holbrook sent a one-line email after, "Well done, Mitchell. Didn't think you'd quit anyway?" I stared at that email longer than I care to admit. It was just 5 words, but it meant more than any compliment I'd ever gotten at home. Around that time, the base held an open house. Families were allowed to visit. I didn't invite mine. Still, a part of me wondered if they'd surprise me. They didn't. Instead, I saw another recruit's parents hugging their daughter near the hangar, both crying, both proud. The father saluted her. The mother whispered something that made the girl smile. I stood far enough away that no one noticed me watching, but the ache in my chest was familiar. Later that night, I went back to my dorm, cleaned my boots, and stared at my reflection in the metal locker. My face looked older, sharper. I thought about how Mom used to tell Brianna she was beautiful, how Dad always said she had potential. They never used words like that with me. Maybe they didn't need to. Potential implies something waiting to bloom. I was already fully built, functional, reliable, unsentimental. When my shift started the next morning, Holbrook passed me in the corridor. "You ready for the finance cross-training?" "Yes, sir." He nodded. "Good. Let's make sure you get what you deserve." Alu. That line hit harder than it should have. For once, someone said I deserved something and meant it. That night, I stayed late in the operations office, typing reports while the base lights flickered low. The sound of distant jets filled the silence. It wasn't peace, but it was close. I had no idea yet how far this new path would take me. All I knew was that for the first time in my life, the ground I was standing on belonged entirely to me. The sound of metal doors slamming shut echoed through the hallway as I walked into the data office that morning. Rows of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the coffee machine gurgled like it was dying a slow death. Everyone moved with that same robotic precision, clipboard in hand, eyes straight ahead, emotions switched off. Somewhere in that mix, I'd started to fit right in. Working in logistics and finance meant endless spreadsheets, inventory counts, and supply reports. It wasn't glamorous, but it was quiet, and quiet meant I could breathe. I was good at this kind of order. Numbers didn't lie, they didn't play favorites, and they didn't need your smile to like you. They just added up or they didn't. Captain Holbrook had a habit of appearing when you least expected it. One afternoon, he leaned against my desk while I typed up a monthly report. "You missed a field," he said without looking up. "I didn't," I replied. The data was incomplete, so I flagged it for correction. He checked the sheet, then nodded. "You're right. Most people would have guessed. Guessing gets people court-martialed," I said. That made him laugh. "Fair point. You planning on making a career out of this?" "Out of what paperwork?" He smirked. "Out of proving everyone wrong." I didn't answer. He wasn't wrong. A few weeks later, he recommended me for a base audit prep team, something usually reserved for higher-ranking personnel. It meant longer hours, more stress, and the possibility of getting chewed out by officers if anything went wrong. Naturally, I said yes. The work was brutal. 12-hour days reviewing invoices and tracking supplies across multiple departments. If a single number didn't match, someone got called in for questioning. It was the kind of job no one volunteered for because there was zero glory in it. But when the final inspection came, the external auditors found 0 errors in our section. Holbrook walked past my desk, gave one short nod and said, "Nice work, Mitchell." It was just 2 words. But in a world where silence was the default, 2 words could mean everything. That same week, I received a letter from home. Mom's handwriting, small and neat. The envelope smelled like the house laundry detergent and faint perfume. Inside, a short note. "Hope you're doing well. Brianna got her first apartment in Chicago. We helped her with the deposit. You'd love it, she has a balcony view. That was it. No, we miss you. No, we're proud of you. Just a casual update about the daughter who always had a net waiting to catch her. I put the letter back in its envelope and slid it into a drawer. I didn't tear it, didn't throw it away. I just didn't want to look at it again. The next morning, I showed up to work 30 minutes early. Not out of anger, but because there was something satisfying about being where no one expected me. Being early meant control. It meant nobody could take that from me. At lunch, Rivera, one of the few people I actually tolerated, sat across from me in the cafeteria. You ever gonna take a day off? He asked, mouth full of mashed potatoes. I take breaks, I said. 15 minutes of staring at spreadsheets doesn't count. I shrugged. Beats thinking. He looked at me for a moment, then said, You know, some of us join the military to get away from our families. You look like you're trying to replace yours. I didn't respond right away. Then I said, Maybe I just want one that functions. He whistled low. That bad, huh? I didn't answer, but he didn't push. Rivera had been around long enough to know that silence said more than words. A month later, during a training rotation, our squad was sent to assist with an equipment transfer in another facility. It was supposed to be routine. Instead, the truck shipment arrived short by 3 crates of communication gear, an immediate red flag. The officer on duty panicked and blamed our unit. Holbrook was called in. While everyone argued, I asked to check the digital logs. Turns out, the missing items had been misrouted due to a clerical error, wrong base code. Not sabotage, just sloppiness. I printed the documentation and handed it to Holbrook mid-meeting. He looked at it, then said to the other officer, My team's clear. Ender 4. Afterward, he stopped me in the corridor. You just saved us from a week of investigations, he said. Someone had to read the fine print. He nodded. You've got a good head, Mitchell. Ever think about studying finance formally? You'd make one hell of an analyst. I wouldn't know where to start, I said. Start by applying, he replied, then walked off. That night, I sat in the dorm lounge, laptop open, staring at a blank application for the Air Force Tuition Assistance Program. I had the credits, the experience, even the recommendation, but hitting submit felt like jumping off a cliff. It wasn't fear of failing. It was the idea of succeeding without anyone to tell. Still, I hit submit. A few weeks later, approval came through. I could take classes in accounting and management online during off-duty hours. No family loans, no apologies. Just me, my work, and the system that would pay me back for the sweat I'd already spent. Balancing duty shifts and classes nearly broke me. I'd finish a 12-hour day, then spend another 4 staring at spreadsheets and lectures until my eyes burned. But the exhaustion didn't feel like punishment, it felt like building something solid. One night, Holbrook walked past the office and saw me studying. You still here? Just catching up on coursework. He leaned against the doorframe. You know, most people would use free time to sleep. End quote. Most people didn't grow up in the Mitchell household, I said. He raised an eyebrow. That bad? Let's just say, some people get love, others get lessons. He nodded slowly. Well, looks like you learned the right ones. For a second, I didn't know what to say. Then he said, You've got potential, Kara. Don't waste it trying to prove yourself to the wrong people. I wanted to tell him I didn't have anyone left to prove anything to, but part of me knew that wasn't true. When I finally got back to my dorm, I opened my email inbox and reread the approval letter for my classes. My name, Airman First Class Kara Mitchell, looked strange next to the words authorized funding for education. It was like seeing a version of myself I hadn't met yet. The base lights outside flickered, jets roared in the distance, and I closed the laptop with a quiet snap. Somewhere out there, Brianna was living off the money I'd never see. But in this world, this cold, structured, relentless place, I was earning something she never could. The right to say, I did it myself. I turned off the light, the room falling into silence except for the low hum of the heater. For the first time, that silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The first time I went home after joining the Air Force, I almost turned the car around halfway there. The closer I got to Columbus, the tighter my chest felt. Every street looked the same, but smaller, like the whole place had shrunk while I was gone. The houses still had the same manicured lawns, the same mailboxes with little flags sticking up, the same neighbors pretending to care. Only difference was me. I wasn't the girl who used to beg for attention anymore. I was the woman who earned her own name. When I pulled into the driveway, my mom was standing on the porch. She waved like I'd just come back from a weekend trip, not 4 years in the service. Dad came out too, holding a beer, squinting like he was trying to figure out if I'd grown taller or just different. "Wow, Kara," Mom said, looking at my uniform. "You look so official." "Thanks," I said, setting my duffel bag down. "Good to see you." She leaned in for a quick hug, the kind that barely touched shoulders. Dad clapped me once on the back. "How's the army?" he asked. "It's the Air Force," I corrected. Right, he said. "Planes, that's good." Inside, the house hadn't changed at all. Same furniture, same framed photos of Brianna on every wall, her graduation, her first apartment, her trip to Italy. I wasn't in a single new one. The last photo of me there was from high school, holding a participation trophy for science fair. "Brianna's driving down from Chicago tomorrow," Mom said while setting the table. "She can't wait to see you." End of C. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if that was true. Dinner was awkward. Mom talked about Brianna's job at a marketing firm, how her boss saw real potential in her. Dad bragged about the balcony view in her apartment like he'd personally built it. They asked about my life too, but in the way people ask out of obligation. "How's the food in the military?" Mom said. "It's fine. Are you dating anyone?" "No." Dad chuckled. "Hard to find romance in a bunker, huh?" I smiled politely, chewed my steak, and kept my answers short. They didn't really want to know. They just wanted to check the ask about Kara box. After dinner, I went upstairs to my old room. It smelled faintly of dust and disinterest. The posters were gone, replaced with a stack of storage boxes labeled holiday decor. My name wasn't on any of them. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall where my old high school medals used to hang. Mom had replaced them with one of Brianna's framed degrees. When Brianna arrived the next day, she pulled up in a shiny black car that looked like it belonged in a commercial. She jumped out wearing heels and sunglasses big enough to cover half her face. "Oh my God, Kara," she said, hugging me like we were best friends. "You look serious, like a real soldier." "Airman," I said, half smiling. "Right, airman. That's so cool. You must have like crazy stories." Mostly about waking up early and paperwork," I said. She laughed. "Classic you. Still the responsible one." Mom called us in for brunch, which looked more like a spread for a magazine shoot, pancakes, berries, the whole thing. Brianna did most of the talking. She told stories about her new boyfriend, her boss, her weekend trips. Mom and Dad hung on every word. When she paused to sip her coffee, Mom turned to me and said, "You must be so proud of your sister." That one landed harder than I expected. Proud? Sure, but mostly tired. After brunch, Brianna wanted to take a photo. For Instagram. She positioned us by the front door, her in the middle, me to the side. She made sure her outfit popped against my plain uniform. "Smile, Kara," she said. "You look too intense." I forced one. She posted it 10 minutes later with the caption, "Family time. So proud of my little sis serving the country." Little sis. That night, Dad turned on a football game, and Mom scrolled through her phone, laughing at Brianna's posts. Every once in a while, I caught them glancing at me, like they were trying to find something to say but couldn't figure out how. I ended up washing dishes, just to have something to do. Mom finally broke the silence. "You know, Kara, we're just so glad you turned out strong. Not everyone could handle what you've done." "Yeah," I said, drying a plate. "You made sure of that." "And crests." She frowned slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," I said quickly. "Just tired." When I went to bed, I lay awake listening to Brianna laughing in the next room, probably on a call with her boyfriend. Her laugh hadn't changed. Bright, effortless, the kind that filled a room without trying. I used to envy it. Now it just sounded like background noise. The next morning, I woke early and went for a run through the neighborhood. The same streets I'd biked down as a kid looked smaller now, like they'd lost their shine. A few neighbors waved. Some recognized me, most didn't. I passed the park where Mom used to take us, the one where Brianna got a new bike and I got her old one. I remembered the look on Mom's face when she said, "You're strong, Kara. You'll be fine." Funny how those same words had followed me all the way into the Air Force. When I got back, Dad was reading the paper at the kitchen table. You heading back soon? He asked. Tomorrow morning. Already? You just got here. There's work to do. He nodded. That's my girl. Always busy. It was meant as a compliment, but it sounded like an obituary. Later that day, Brianna wanted to drive me into town for coffee. Come on, my treat, she said, jingling her car keys. It's not every day my sister comes home in uniform. We sat at a cafe near downtown, the kind that charged $6 for a latte. Brianna talked non-stop about her new project at work. I listened, stirring my coffee until it went cold. Then she looked at me and said, You know, Mom worries about you. She says you don't call enough. I don't call because there's nothing to say. She frowned. That's not fair. They love you, Kara. Do they? Or do they just love the version of me that doesn't need them? She didn't answer. I finished my coffee and looked out the window. Families passed by holding hands, laughing, living those normal lives I'd stopped chasing. You got lucky, I said finally. What do you mean? You never had to prove anything. Brianna went quiet for once. That's not my fault. I know, I said, standing up, but it was never my choice either. When I got back to the house that evening, Mom was making dinner again, humming like nothing had happened. Dad was watching TV. Brianna was in the living room, scrolling through her phone. It hit me then this house wasn't home anymore. It was a museum of old habits, and I didn't belong in any of the exhibits. The next morning, before sunrise, I packed my bag. Mom woke up when she heard the door. You're leaving already? She whispered. Yeah, got a long drive. She looked at me for a second, like she wanted to say something meaningful, but all she said was, You'll be fine, Kara. You always are. I smiled, stepped outside, and closed the door behind me. The air was cool, the sky still dark. For once, I didn't feel like running away. It just felt like leaving behind something that had already ended years ago. The first time I realized the Air Force wasn't as fair as I'd thought, I was sitting in a briefing room surrounded by men who'd already decided I didn't belong there. It wasn't said outright, but it was written in their expressions, the half smile, the raised eyebrow, the quick glances at each other whenever I spoke. I'd worked harder than any of them to get into that room, and somehow, that made them uncomfortable. I'd just completed my certification in operations finance, a year of late nights, caffeine, and enough paperwork to rebuild the Pentagon. My scores were among the top 5 in the region, and Holbrook had recommended me for an internal promotion to staff sergeant. It was supposed to be routine. I met all the criteria. Instead, it turned into a silent debate about whether I fit the profile. During the review meeting, one of the senior officers, Major Stanton, said, She's good, but maybe she's better suited to administrative work. Logistics is demanding. You know how that can get. Holbrook glanced at him. With respect, sir, she's already handling double shifts in logistics and outperforming her peers. Stanton shrugged. Just thinking long term. Not everyone thrives under combat-level stress. They meant not every woman. I kept my face neutral, but my stomach tightened. After the meeting, Holbrook pulled me aside in the hallway. You heard that, right? Every word. You want me to talk to them again? No, I said. I'll talk with results. For the next 6 months, I pushed harder than I thought I could. I volunteered for night logistics runs, filled in for missing supervisors, and handled equipment audits no one else wanted to touch. When other officers clocked out, I stayed. When they missed deadlines, I covered for them without saying a word. I wasn't trying to be liked. I was trying to make myself undeniable. Somewhere around month 4, one of the guys in my unit, Torres, decided he didn't like being outranked by someone half his size. He called me ma'am in a tone that made it sound like an insult. Once, when I corrected a report he'd botched, he muttered, Guess I'll let the girl boss handle it. I looked at him, calm as I could manage, and said, Good idea. Someone has to. Word got around after that. Not the insult, the comeback. And slowly, something changed. They stopped testing me. They still didn't treat me like one of them, but they stopped pretending I was fragile. That was enough. When the next review period came, Holbrook called me into his office. Promotion's official, he said, sliding the folder across the desk. I flipped it open, scanning the page. Staff Sergeant Mitchell. The words looked strange in print. You earned it, he said. I know, I replied, smiling for real this time. Later that night, I went to the gym, and ran until my legs burned. Not to celebrate, just to remind myself I could. Every step felt like proof that effort still meant something, even if recognition came late. Around that time, I started mentoring a new recruit named Harper. Fresh out of training, eager, still calling everyone sir even when she didn't have to. She reminded me of myself, minus the scars. One day, after a rough drill, she sat beside me in the mess hall. "Does it ever get easier?" she asked. "No," I said, cutting into a bland chicken breast. "You just get stronger." She frowned. "I feel like I have to work twice as hard to get half the credit." "You do," I said, "but you'll survive it. And one day, the same people who underestimate you will ask for your help." She smiled weakly. "You sound like you've done this before." "Once or twice." We ate in silence after that. I could tell she was still trying to figure out if she admired me or pitied me. Maybe both. A few months later, we were assigned to a joint logistics mission coordinating supplies for a humanitarian airlift. The schedule was brutal, the weather worse. We were running shifts around the clock. At 2 a.m., while overseeing a shipment, I spotted a miscalculated fuel manifest that could have delayed an entire convoy. I fixed it on the spot, recalculated the route, and called it in before anyone noticed. When the mission wrapped, the commanding officer commended our unit. He said, "Smoothest coordination I've seen in years." I didn't correct him when he looked right past me to congratulate someone else. Holbrook caught my eye from across the tarmac and gave the smallest nod. That was enough. Later that week, I got an email from Harper. "Thanks for covering for me during the airlift. I owe you one." I replied, "Just pay it forward. Someone will need you to do the same someday." At the same time, back home, Brianna posted pictures from another vacation, some beach with turquoise water and expensive drinks. Mom commented, "So proud of you, honey. You've worked so hard." I stared at that comment longer than I should have, then closed the app. That night, I sat outside the barracks, staring at the sky. Planes cut through the clouds, their engines humming low and steady. I used to wonder what it felt like to be proud of yourself without needing someone else to say it first. I didn't wonder anymore. A few days later, during a meeting, Holbrook announced he was being reassigned overseas. The room went quiet. Afterward, he stopped by my desk. "You'll do fine without me," he said. "I wasn't worried," I replied. He chuckled. "I figured." Then his expression softened. "Don't let them grind you down, Mitchell. The system eats people like us if we let it." End quote. "I've been chewed up by worse," I said. He smiled. "That's why you'll make it." After he left, I felt something I hadn't expected: gratitude, mixed with something heavier. He'd been the first superior to treat me like more than a placeholder. But even as I thought it, I realized I didn't need that kind of validation anymore. Over the next year, I built my own rhythm again: classes at night, missions during the day, the occasional letter from Mom that always began with, "Hope you're doing well," and ended with news about Brianna. The pattern was so predictable it became almost comforting. When my re-enlistment papers came up, I hesitated. I'd done 4 years. I'd proven myself. I could have stayed, climbed higher, lived in that structured world forever. But there was a quiet voice in my head, one that sounded less like rebellion and more like resolve. It said, "You've built a foundation. Now build a future." That night, I signed the form declining re-enlistment. My next chapter wasn't going to be about orders or ranks. It was going to be about choice, something I'd never really had before. When I handed in the papers, my commanding officer looked at me. "You sure about this?" "Yes, sir. Most people get lost when they leave." I nodded. "I've been lost before. It's not permanent." He nodded back. "Good luck out there, Sergeant." "Thanks," I said. "But luck's not really my thing." As I stepped outside the building, the wind hit my face sharp, cold, but clean. I took one last look at the hangars, the flags, the endless concrete stretching under the sunrise. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was walking away from something. I was walking toward something I'd finally earned the right to define. The morning after I signed my discharge papers, the world felt too quiet. No reveille, no boots stomping the floor above me, no clipped orders echoing down the hallway. Just the soft hum of my car's engine and a stack of folded uniforms in the back seat. It was strange. After years of being told exactly where to go and when, I was finally free to choose. Freedom, as it turned out, was both a gift and a dare. I rented a small apartment near downtown Columbus. Nothing fancy, one bedroom, thin walls, and a kitchen sink that made a groaning sound every time the water ran. Still, it was mine. The first night I slept there, the silence was so deep it almost felt wrong. I kept waiting for someone to tell me to move faster, to wake up, to do something, but no one did. The next morning, I opened my laptop and started the process for my GI Bill benefits. Tuition, housing allowance, books all covered if you knew how to file the mountain of paperwork. Lucky for me, I'd spent years mastering bureaucracy. A few weeks later, I got the confirmation email. Approved for full educational assistance. I stared at that message for a long time. 4 years of sweat and sleepless nights had finally bought me a ticket to the future my parents once said I couldn't afford. I enrolled in an MBA program at Franklin University. Classes started in the fall. I still had months to fill before that, so I picked up a part-time job at a logistics firm downtown. Old habits die hard. I couldn't sit still. The job wasn't glamorous, lots of spreadsheets and client calls, but it felt familiar. Organized chaos, the kind that rewarded competence. On my first day, my supervisor, a guy named Harris with a permanently wrinkled shirt and a coffee addiction, handed me a stack of files. "You military types love structure, right?" he said, half joking. "Structure keeps people from making expensive mistakes," I replied. He laughed. "You'll fit right in." I did more than fit in, I thrived. The late nights, the attention to detail, the calm under pressure, all of it carried over from the service. The office was its own kind of battlefield, just with less shouting and more passive-aggressive emails. Meanwhile, my parents barely called. When they did, it was to update me on Brianna's career. She'd been promoted to account executive at her firm in Chicago. Mom said it like she was reading a headline about royalty. "That's great," I said each time. "Tell her congrats." They never asked about my classes, my work, or what I was doing with my life. At first, it stung. Then, slowly, it didn't. I'd stopped needing their curiosity to measure my worth. When classes began, I threw myself into them. Finance, operations, organizational behavior, all the stuff that used to sound boring now made sense. Every principle, every case study, every line of theory felt like a code I'd been cracking for years without knowing it. My classmates complained about workload. I thought it was light duty. Most of them were in their 20s, straight out of undergrad, still figuring out who they were. They looked at me like I was from another planet. I guess in some ways I was. I'd seen people break under pressure. I'd seen structure hold lives together and tear them apart. When you've learned to function on 4 hours of sleep and a constant adrenaline drip, a business case study doesn't exactly scare you. One evening after class, my professor, Dr. Reynolds, stopped me on the way out. "You've got a sharp analytical mind," he said. "Comes from counting other people's mistakes for a living," I joked. He smiled. "I'm serious. You should apply for the Falcon and Pierce Fellowship. It's competitive, but it could open doors." I'd heard of it: national scholarship, full sponsorship for top students in finance and leadership, the kind of thing kids with trust funds and perfect resumes applied for. "I don't think I fit their mold," I said. He shook his head. "You fit exactly what they're looking for. They just don't know it yet." That line stuck with me for days. I went home and looked up the fellowship details. Essay requirements, recommendation letters, transcripts. I had all of it. What I didn't have was the confidence that they'd take someone like me, a veteran with a blue-collar family and no fancy connections. Still, the application deadline was 6 weeks away. I printed it out, stuck it on my fridge, and told myself I'd decide later. The next weekend, Brianna called out of the blue. Her tone was bright, rehearsed. "Hey sis! Haven't heard from you in forever." "Yeah, I've been busy," I said. "Mom said you're back in school. That's awesome. You always were the overachiever." I could hear wine glasses clinking in the background, city noise filtering through. Something like that. "So listen," she continued, "I might come home next month. Maybe we can grab lunch, catch up?" "Sure," I said, though I didn't mean it. When I hung up, I stared at the scholarship form again. Overachiever. Funny how that word always came with a little edge when Brianna said it. Like being hardworking was somehow unattractive. That night, I started drafting my essay. I didn't write about grades or test scores. I wrote about nights in barracks, about catching mistakes before they cost lives, about learning how to build systems that didn't fail under pressure. I wrote about resilience not as a buzzword, but as muscle memory. 3 weeks later, I submitted it. When the confirmation email came through, I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not Brianna, not even Harris at work. I'd learned the hard way that some victories are safer in silence. Meanwhile, life fell into a steady rhythm. Work during the day, classes at night, assignments bleeding into weekends. Exhaustion felt like an old friend again. The difference was, this time, it was getting me somewhere. A few months later, I got a message from Dr. Reynolds. "Call me when you can." I did. "You made it to the finalist round," he said. "What?" "You heard me. They were impressed especially with your essay. Said it felt real." I didn't know whether to laugh or panic. "So what happens now?" "Panel interview in 2 weeks. I'll help you prep." When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. Somewhere between deployments and dinner tables, between duty shifts and disappointments, I'd built a version of myself that no one could ignore anymore. The day of the interview came fast. I wore a plain navy suit and carried my military ID in my wallet like a lucky charm. The panelists asked questions about leadership, crisis management, ethics. I answered every one of them like I was back on base. Clear, direct, no fluff. At the end, one of them smiled. "You've been through more than most of our applicants. What drives you to keep pushing?" I thought for a second. "Because people expect me to stop." They laughed softly, but I meant it. 2 weeks later, the email arrived. Subject line: Falcon and Pierce National Fellowship. Congratulations. I didn't scream. I didn't even smile right away. I just sat there, letting it sink in. Every sleepless night, every ignored call, every quiet sacrifice, it all added up to this. When I finally exhaled, it wasn't triumph I felt. It was peace. A steady, grounded kind of peace that comes when you realize you've outgrown the place you were told to stay. I closed my laptop, leaned back, and looked around my small apartment, the same cracked ceiling, the same flickering kitchen light. Nothing about it had changed, but I had. When the email came through, I read it twice, just to make sure it was real. "Congratulations, you are one of 5 national recipients of the Falcon and Pierce Fellowship." My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my coffee. I'd read those words so many times in the application. "Tell us why you deserve this opportunity," and now I had my answer. Because I earned it. I sat there in my tiny apartment, the morning sun cutting through the blinds, turning dust into glitter. The world outside was already awake, cars honking, a dog barking down the street, but for a moment everything was quiet. 4 years of military service, 2 years of night classes, and a lifetime of being told I didn't need help had led to this moment. I didn't call anyone, not my parents, not Brianna, especially not Brianna. I'd learned by then that good news was safest when it stayed private. That week, I received a formal invitation to the award ceremony in New York. The letter said recipients were encouraged to bring family. The thought made me laugh out loud. Family. The same people who thought my independence made me unworthy of support. The irony was almost poetic. At work, Harris noticed I was distracted. "You win the lottery or something?" he asked. "Something like that," I said. "Must be big. You're actually smiling." "Just something I worked for finally paying off." He raised his coffee mug. "Then you better celebrate. You've earned it." Those words hit harder than he knew. I had earned it every late night, every quiet rejection, every insult disguised as advice. I spent the next few days preparing for the ceremony. Bought a simple black dress. Nothing flashy. I wanted the accomplishment to speak louder than the clothes. The invitation said there'd be press, sponsors, and corporate representatives from major firms. Falcon and Pierce wasn't just a scholarship. It was a door into the kind of world where success wasn't a fantasy. One evening, as I was ironing the dress, my phone buzzed. Mom's name lit up on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Kara, it's been forever," she said. Her voice too bright, too polite. "How's school? We were just talking about you." "I'm fine," I said. "Oh, good. Your sister just got a promotion, senior account manager now. Isn't that exciting?" "That's great for her," I said, trying to sound neutral. "She works so hard, you know, always pushing herself." "Yeah," I said quietly. "Must run in the family." She didn't catch the tone. "Well, we'd love to see you soon." Maybe come home for a weekend? Actually, there's an event coming up, I said before I could stop myself. It's a scholarship award ceremony in New York. Oh, that sounds nice. Is it one of those school things? Something like that. We'll have to see if we can make it. When is it? Next Friday. That's short notice, honey. But if we can, we'll come. Brianna's been dying for a little trip. I almost told her not to bother, but something in me hesitated. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the part of me that still wanted them to see what strong looked like up close. Sure, I said. If you can make it. The day of the ceremony came faster than I expected. The venue was beautiful, a glass-walled hall overlooking the city skyline, the kind of place that made you feel like everything you'd done was finally visible. There were tables set with silver cutlery, a stage draped in navy and gold, and a banner that read, "Celebrating Excellence and Resilience." I checked in at the registration desk, pinned my name badge to my dress, and found my seat among the other recipients. Everyone was smiling nervously, rehearsing their small talk. Then I saw them. My parents walked in first, Dad in a wrinkled blazer, Mom in a pearl necklace she only wore for church, and next to them, Brianna, in a bright red dress that looked designed to steal attention. She spotted me and waved like we were close. I waved back, keeping my face neutral. They joined me at the table just as the lights dimmed. "You look wonderful, Kara," Mom said. "We had no idea this was such a formal event." "And it's a national fellowship," I said. "There's usually some ceremony involved." Dad looked around. "Fancy place? Must have cost a fortune." "It's covered," I said, "by the organization." When the ceremony began, the host took the stage, talking about perseverance, dedication, and the power of self-made success. I could feel my parents straightening up, as if they'd suddenly realized this wasn't a minor school award. Then the announcer said, "Our next recipient exemplifies quiet determination. She worked nights while pursuing her degree and served honorably in the United States Air Force. Her professors describe her as disciplined, humble, and relentless. Please welcome Kara Mitchell." The applause was loud, but all I heard was silence. I stood, smoothed my dress, and walked to the stage. The words, "without family support," echoed through the speakers, slicing through the room like a blade. From the stage, I saw them clearly: Mom's frozen smile, Dad's blank stare, Brianna's camera slowly lowering. Their faces said everything they never had to. The dean shook my hand. "Congratulations, Miss Mitchell. You've earned this." "I know," I said softly. Flashes from cameras popped in front of me. Every step back to my seat felt heavier and lighter all at once. At the table, Mom cleared her throat. "We didn't realize this was such a big deal." "I told you," I said. "It's national." "And Dad fumbled for words. "We're proud of you, kiddo." He nodded. "Thanks." Brianna leaned in, whispering, "I had no idea you were doing all this. Why didn't you say anything?" "Because you never asked." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of handshakes and congratulations. A recruiter from Falcon and Pierce's corporate division handed me his card. "We're always looking for talent with your background," he said. "Let's talk." Mom smiled awkwardly. "See, Kara? Hard work pays off." "And one." "It does," I said. "Just not always the way you think." As the event ended, guests drifted toward the exit. My family lingered, unsure what to say. Finally, Mom said, "Let's grab dinner to celebrate." "I can't," I said. "The fellows are meeting with sponsors after this." "Oh," she said, her voice faltering. "Another time then." I picked up my award and looked at the gold lettering on the plaque. My name, carved cleanly and permanently. There it was proof. When I turned back, they were still standing there, looking small under the bright lights. For once, I didn't feel the need to shrink myself to make them comfortable. I walked toward the exit, the city lights beyond the glass glinting like 1,000 tiny promises. Each step felt lighter than the last, like shedding a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying for years. Outside, a breeze cut through the night, crisp and cool. The sound of traffic mixed with laughter from nearby streets. I tightened my grip on the plaque and smiled to myself. It wasn't revenge, not the kind that made noise or headlines. It was quieter than that. It was peace disguised as victory. The morning of graduation started quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like the air is waiting for something. The city was just waking up when I stood in front of the mirror, pinning my cap in place. The reflection staring back didn't look like the girl who once begged her parents to believe in her. She looked like someone who stopped asking and started earning. My gown hung perfectly, the tassel a deep navy against the black fabric, and on the inside pocket, I slipped the same Air Force pin I'd worn under my uniform. It wasn't part of the outfit, it was part of the reason. The university auditorium was already filling when I arrived. Rows of folding chairs lined the floor, families crowding into every seat, holding cameras and flowers. The smell of coffee and perfume mixed in the air. On stage, a banner read Franklin University Commencement Ceremony. I found my seat among the graduates, second row from the front. My palms were steady, my heartbeat wasn't. When the dean stepped up to the podium, his voice echoed across the room, full of the kind of pride only administrators could perfect. "Today," he said, "we honor the students who've shown determination, intelligence, and integrity in pursuit of their goals." The applause was polite, predictable. My eyes wandered to the front row where families, Saturday. And there they were, my parents and Brianna, perfectly positioned, like they'd been waiting for this photo op their whole lives. Mom waved when she saw me, all smiles, pretending like this was her victory too. Dad gave a stiff nod, and Brianna mouthed, "You look great." I nodded back, but something inside me stayed cold. Names began to roll. One by one, students crossed the stage to polite claps, their families cheering as if pride could be measured by volume. I barely listened. My mind drifted back to that night years ago when I heard my parents whisper that Brianna deserved it and I didn't. It had taken me 4 years in uniform, another 2 in classrooms, and countless sleepless nights to turn those words into fuel. And now, they were sitting here, waiting to celebrate what they thought was another routine graduation. The dean called the next name, Brianna Mitchell, Bachelor of Communications. The applause was loud. Mom and Dad clapped like they'd just witnessed a miracle. Brianna beamed, waving to the crowd as her camera flash caught my eye. When she stepped off the stage, she glanced back at me, smiling like we shared the moment. Then, the dean's tone changed. His voice slowed, took on that rehearsed cadence speakers use when they want to make sure every word lands. "Our next graduate," he said, "is receiving her master's in business administration. She completed her degree while working full-time and previously served 4 years in the United States Air Force. She is the recipient of the Falcon and Pierce National Fellowship, awarded for exceptional academic performance and leadership under adversity." The pause before my name was long enough for the air to thicken. "Please welcome Kara Mitchell." The sound that followed wasn't polite applause. It was a wave, the kind of sound that fills a room and leaves it humming. My name echoed through the speakers, and as I stood, I caught the sight of my parents' faces. Mom's smile faltered. Dad blinked, stunned. Brianna froze mid-clap, her expression halfway between confusion and disbelief. I walked to the stage, each step measured, unhurried. The dean extended his hand. "Congratulations, Miss Mitchell. You've done remarkable work." "Thank you," I said. "It's been earned." That. The flash from cameras lit the room. Somewhere in the audience, I saw Brianna lower hers. Her hands were still clapping, but her eyes weren't smiling anymore. As I stood on that stage, diploma in one hand, I felt the strangest thing calm. No fire, no rush of triumph, just the kind of peace that comes from knowing you've rewritten the ending without needing anyone's permission. When I returned to my seat, the rest of the ceremony blurred together. Speeches about ambition, perseverance, and dreams filled the air, but I barely heard them. I was watching my parents. They whispered to each other occasionally, stiff, polite, their smiles more for show than pride. After the ceremony ended, the crowd spilled into the courtyard. Families hugged, confetti floated in the air, and everyone posed for pictures in front of the big Franklin University banner. I found myself standing a few feet away from the noise, holding my diploma like it was something fragile. Mom reached me first. "Kara, honey," she said, voice high and tight. "We had no idea you were involved in all this. The scholarship, the award, everything, it's incredible." I smiled faintly. "You never asked." Her expression faltered. "Don't be like that. We've always been proud of you." I met her eyes. "No, Mom. You've been proud of how little I needed you." Dad stepped in, clearing his throat. "We just didn't realize how serious you were about school after the Air Force. We thought maybe you'd figure it out." I finished for him. "Yeah, I did. He nodded awkwardly, looking anywhere but at me. Brianna stood behind them, quiet for once. Her makeup was perfect, but her voice wasn't steady when she finally spoke. "I didn't know you got that fellowship," she said softly. "I mean, wow, that's huge." "Yeah," I said. "It was. Ow, no. You didn't tell anyone?" "I didn't think anyone would care." She swallowed. "I would have cared." I looked at her, and for a second, I almost believed her. "Maybe," I said, "but you didn't look very closely back then." Silence hung between us. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled, it just tells the truth louder than words. A man in a dark suit approached me then. "Miss Mitchell," he said, offering his hand. "I'm with Falcon and Pierce. We'd love to talk about opportunities in our New York office." I shook his hand. "I'd love that." He handed me his card, congratulated me again, and walked off into the crowd. Mom glanced at the card, trying to hide her curiosity. "That sounds important," she said. "It is," I replied, "and it's mine." We took a few photos, awkward smiles, too much distance between us to hide in a frame. Mom insisted on holding my diploma for one picture. I let her, mostly because I didn't care enough to stop her. As the crowd thinned, I looked around at the swirl of laughter, the snapping of cameras, the endless congratulations, all the noise of people being seen. And yet, standing there with my family, I realized something. I didn't need their recognition anymore. Their approval didn't weigh anything here. Mom squeezed my arm one last time before they left. "We really are proud of you, sweetheart. Let's talk soon." "Sure," I said. When they walked away, I didn't watch them go. I turned toward the recruiter's table where a small group of professionals was gathered, the skyline of the city glittering through the glass behind them. That's where I belong now, in rooms where effort was currency, where worth wasn't measured by who loved you least. The noise around me faded as I joined the group, shaking hands, answering questions, smiling because for once it wasn't forced. Every word felt lighter, every breath steadier. Somewhere behind me, I heard Brianna calling my name for one last photo. I didn't turn around. I kept talking, kept smiling, kept walking forward. By the time the reception ended, the courtyard was almost empty. Balloons deflated slowly in the corner, confetti stuck to the pavement, and the smell of coffee and champagne hung in the air. I stood near the edge of the lawn, watching as the event staff cleared tables and folded chairs. The golden plaque in my hands caught the last of the sunlight, glowing faintly like it still couldn't believe it belonged to me. Inside the hall, I could see my family through the glass doors. They were standing awkwardly near the exit, Mom rubbing her arms, Dad pretending to check his phone, Brianna scrolling through photos she probably wouldn't post. None of them moved toward me, and for once, that didn't sting. I didn't need them to follow. My phone buzzed in my hand. A text from Mom. "We're proud of you. Let's talk later. Love, Mom." I typed back, "Thanks. I'm busy right now." Then I slid the phone into my purse and didn't look at it again. A recruiter from Falcon and Pierce approached me as I lingered by the entrance. His name tag said Mark Thompson, Corporate Development. "Miss Mitchell, we're so glad you could make it tonight. Congratulations on the award," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Thank you," I replied. He nodded toward the reception room where several executives were chatting. "If you're free, we'd love to discuss potential roles in our New York office. Your profile fits exactly what we're looking for. Discipline, financial background, leadership." I smiled. "That sounds good. I'm ready to work." He laughed. "I can tell." We talked for 20 minutes about job placements, training programs, relocation benefits. Every word felt like the world opening a little wider. By the time he handed me his card and said, "Expect an offer soon," I already knew the answer I'd give. When I finally stepped outside, the city was buzzing, cars streaming past, the streetlights flickering on one by one. I walked a few blocks without direction, heels clicking against the pavement. The sound echoed, rhythmic, steady, like punctuation marks, closing a story that had taken too long to end. I found a bench near the park and sat down, resting the award on my lap. Across the street, a couple laughed, sharing fries from a paper cup. A little boy ran after pigeons, his laughter echoing down the sidewalk. Ordinary life. Simple, light, unburdened. It felt foreign but good. I thought about what Mom used to say whenever I got hurt as a kid. You're strong, Kara. You'll be fine. She meant it as comfort, but now I realized it was an excuse, a way to stop trying. She'd confused strength with self-sufficiency, love with endurance. Maybe that's why she couldn't see me unless I was suffering. But I wasn't suffering now, not anymore. By the time I got back to my hotel, it was almost midnight. I placed the plaque on the nightstand, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the edge of the bed. My phone buzzed again this time. Brianna. Dinner tomorrow before you leave? Just us? I stared at the message for a long moment. There was a time when I would have said yes immediately, hoping maybe she wanted to apologize or at least understand. But people don't change just because you do. They only see what fits their version of you. I typed back, maybe another time. I've got packing to do. The next morning, I woke early, sunlight spilling across the white sheets. Downstairs, the hotel lobby buzzed with graduates and families saying goodbye. I passed them quietly, luggage rolling behind me, and stepped into the crisp morning air. My train ticket to New York was folded neatly in my pocket. Before heading to the station, I stopped at a mailbox near the hotel. From my bag, I pulled out an envelope I'd prepared the night before. Inside was a copy of my award letter, the Falcon and Pierce emblem shining at the top. No note, no explanation, just proof. I wrote Mom and Dad on the front, dropped it in, and listened to the soft thud as it landed inside. That was all they'd ever get from me now. Facts, not pleas. The train station was crowded but calm. I found a window seat, set my bag beside me, and watched as the city stretched out in all directions. The train jerked forward, smooth and certain. As it picked up speed, I could feel the weight of everything I was leaving behind. Not regret, just release. Outside the window, buildings gave way to open fields. Power lines cutting across the sky, like lines on a map I didn't need to follow anymore. My reflection in the glass looked steady, unshaken. For the first time, I wasn't chasing validation or proving a point. I was just living. Halfway through the trip, an older woman sitting across from me smiled and asked, "Heading somewhere exciting?" I smiled back. "New York." "New job?" "New start," I said. She nodded knowingly. "That's the best kind." When the train finally pulled into the station, the skyline rose in front of me, steel, glass, and motion. The city hummed like a living thing. I stepped onto the platform, the air buzzing with energy, and felt that small surge in my chest again, the one that came every time I realized I'd done something entirely on my own. The apartment I'd rented was small but had a view of the Hudson, the kind of view you work a lifetime for. I unpacked slowly, setting the plaque on the desk next to my laptop, and taped the scholarship letter beside it. Not as decoration, but as a reminder. That evening, I stood on the balcony, the city stretching endlessly below. Taxis crawled through the streets like veins of light, and the hum of traffic filled the air. The breeze carried the smell of rain and exhaust, familiar and strangely comforting. I pulled my phone from my pocket and saw one more message from Mom. "Dinner's waiting if you ever come home. We love you." I didn't delete it. I didn't respond either. Some words lose their meaning once you stop needing them. The wind picked up, tugging at my hair. Somewhere below, a street musician played a slow, steady tune, something between jazz and memory. I leaned on the railing, letting the sound sink in. They once told me I didn't deserve their help, that I was strong enough to manage alone, and maybe they were right, just not in the way they meant. I didn't deserve it, not because I lacked worth, but because I didn't need it. I'd built something stronger than their approval. I thought about their faces at graduation, the shock, the silence, the realization that the story they'd written for me had changed without their permission. It wasn't anger that filled me now, it was peace. A quiet, certain kind of revenge that didn't need witnesses. The city lights blinked like signals from a world that had finally made room for me. I stood there for a long time, breathing it in, the sound of my own steady heartbeat blending with the hum below. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It's not about making someone pay. It's about walking away, standing taller, and knowing they'll never catch up. When the night deepened and the sky turned black, I went inside, closed the balcony door, and turned off the lights. The city kept shining without me having to chase it. And in that stillness, for the first time in my life, I wasn't the strong one they'd labeled, I was the free one they never saw coming.